Well, it's been a while since we've all gathered here, hasn't it? I will not provide excuses. I have been away for far too long. The week has been quite busy. And sadly, no matter how long I go away, no matter how much I try and avert my eyes and look away from what's going on in our world, the terror, mayhem, and destruction continues unabated. It's happening across the globe. But at any given time, there are hotspots. For a long time, a major hotspot was Yemen. And since last fall, perhaps the biggest hotspot by far on the planet for death and destruction, as far as I know, has been Gaza. And today, we got a peek into just how dark and depraved the situation has become in Gaza. Most of the time when I've talked about Gaza City in recent weeks, it's been in reference to it as a wasteland. It is a post-apocalyptic landscape at this point. If any of you have ever played like Fallout, Gaza kind of looks like that, but with a lot more rubble. And one of the focal points of Gaza City, going back into 2023, had been the Shifa hospital. It was, I can't remember if it started out as the biggest hospital in Gaza, or if it always was the biggest hospital in Gaza, or if it became the biggest hospital of Gaza after another one got destroyed or something like that. But it was a very important hospital. And a lot of people were hiding out there, trying to get out of the fighting. Israel, however, argued that this hospital was actually a secret Hamas command center. That everyone hiding in this hospital were actually Hamas agents in disguise. They were dressed as ununiformed people. They were disguised as sick people in beds. They were disguised as cancer patients and dialysis patients. And so Israel marched into Shifa Hospital. They raided it, like a drug raid or something. And it was pretty embarrassing what they found, which was not much. They found like a couple of guns in closets. Essentially like webbing that had been taken off of a couple of guys perhaps who got injured and were probably brought into the hospital because their stuff was just thrown in the closet. I was actually shocked at how little the Israelis found. I figured just by virtue of, hey, this is a hospital in a war zone, I thought that there would be quite a bit of weaponry in there for the reason I just said. Every time they bring in a guy who had been fighting out there who was injured, you would expect, they take his weaponry off of him so they can operate or do whatever, put him in a hospital gown, and they would just throw it in a closet. So I figured there would be, rooms, or, at least one big room maybe filled to the brim. Because, how many people, there are thousands of people in this hospital. But anyway, they found that, and then they found a laptop, and I can't remember the details about the laptop, but something about what was shown on the screen of the laptop was, it didn't help their case. I should go back and maybe try and watch my own video, because I remember being astonished at the time about just wow, that was, that backfired on Israel. And they ended up having to delete their own video of what they found in Shifa because it was so embarrassing. They were getting ratioed on Twitter, which Twitter's not exactly, it's not exactly a hotbed of anti-Israel sentiment anymore. Not as much as it used to be. And after all, the owner of Twitter has shown quite a bit of support for Israel. But then again, he also did that with Ukraine for a long time. So I think Elon is someone who, I don't want to get off onto I don't want to get into the psychology of Elon's geopolitical opinions. So let's just table that for now, for another day. But anyway, there's apparently been a battle going on for the Al Shifa hospital for the last 2 weeks. And the dust is finally settled. The battle is over. Israel won. Yay. And the hospital is completely destroyed. Supposedly, they say they evacuated the people who were inside. Okay, that's a good thing. I'm happy to hear that. I hope that they got somewhere safe. I mean, I don't know where it could be safe. There is nowhere safe. There are no other hospitals that could have taken all these people. You kind of needed this hospital. I'm sure the others are well beyond capacity. They were at capacity within like a week of the war starting. And I highly doubt that these people were sent to Israeli hospitals. After all, there were apparently 6,000 folks in this hospital. You think the Israelis want 6,000 people from Gaza being brought into their country, taking up space in their hospitals? I would think that that would be a major security risk for them, because these folks who were taken out of Al Shifa Hospital, they probably, they've got a high chance of being radicalized against Israel after everything that has happened to them. So I'm not exactly sure where these people were taken. But nevertheless, we're told that they got out, and of course, fighters and things showed up, for the fight to try and, I don't know if they thought that they were going to win, but yeah, eventually they were going to lose, and they did, because now everything's destroyed. So yeah, they've got no fortification anymore. There is no hospital. It's not going to be usable anytime soon, and by virtue. This is great. So Israel is getting a lot of heat for this, as you might imagine. People are saying, wow, Israel just leveled this hospital. I mean, they didn't literally level it. It hasn't collapsed, but it's completely, it's totally perforated. There's not a window left in the place. It's completely blown out. The place, I'm sure, has to be condemned at this point. There's got to be so much structural damage. And so in defense, what I've been hearing from all of the pro-Israel accounts on Twitter is that the fact that there was a battle at all proves that Israel was justified in destroying the hospital, because you see, if Hamas wasn't active, around this hospital, nobody would have defended it. And so if they had just let us blow the whole thing up, and if there wasn't any Hamas around, Israel would have demolished and blown up this hospital 2 weeks ago. The fact that it took 2 weeks proves that Israel was justified in destroying the hospital. And what do you know? After you evacuate the 6,000 people who were inside the hospital, the only folks who are around left to fight are the Hamas fighters. Imagine that. And I'm taking them at their word, by the way. I don't know how you evacuate 6,000 people out of a hospital, because always there are patients, especially in a time like this, people who are so, critically injured that they can't be moved. It's very difficult to do that in a first world country when there's not a war going on. Evacuating a hospital is a massive undertaking. And I'm not saying that Israel is incapable of that. I'm just saying it does sound a little far-fetched given the circumstances. But again, I'm going to take them at their word, because there's enough here to talk about even without that. I mean, after all, the videos from inside the hospital that was supposedly evacuated of all these people, these patients, emaciated children, it's unspeakable. And honestly, I know this isn't good, because you shouldn't turn away from this kind of darkness. You have to face it. But months ago, I stop every time I scroll past and I see a video and it's of a kid. I just can't look at it. And to see the way that Zionists in America, in particular, I don't hear much of what they say in Israel, but in America, what the Zionists say here about these people, you look at them and you wonder, gee, do they think that way about me too? Do they have any sense of like commonality with their fellow man? Is it only the Palestinians who, in their mind, they've dehumanized? Because it's very primitive, the way that they talk about these people. It's something that you would think, even though I'm someone who's incredibly cynical about humanity, the West, the so-called rules-based international order, the post-World War II liberalism. Even I still, I mean, in the back of my head, I still think, there's some truth to that. Yeah, I mean, we've had to have made some progress as a species, as a society, at least in America, since the Second World War. There had to be some lessons learned then that have carried on to today, right? No. The answer is no. Not only, did you have the Israelis citing the bombing of Dresden as an exemplar that they were following, one of the greatest massacres of the Second World War, perpetrated by the Allies, because of course both sides perpetrated massacres. I'm not one of those people who says that the Axis was not as bad. I definitely think that the Axis was worse. So I don't think that that's really debatable. But there were certainly, in terms of sheer quantity, but in terms of differences in kind, it's a matter of degree and kind. Okay, I think the degree of atrocities committed by the Axis were far greater. But in terms of differences in kind, I don't think that the West, plus the Soviet Union, so let's just say the Allies, I don't think that they were morally superior to the Axis, just based on the actions that were carried out. The bombing of Dresden is a great example of that. And then, of course, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which was cited by an American congressman, a Republican again, from Michigan, who said that the destruction of Gaza should be like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Two bombings on Japan at the very end of the war, when the Japanese were already on their knees begging for mercy. They were at the negotiating table. They wanted to end the war, and Truman's response was to drop the most devastating weapon in human history ever deployed to this day. No other man has ever had the audacity, I mean, that's not a strong enough word, but I can't think of any other word, to unleash the godlike hellfire that Harry Truman unleashed on the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I would think that a civilized people would agree that that was a terrible thing that should never have to happen again, especially after so many decades of humanizing the Japanese. These days, you would be hard-pressed to find any Americans that hate the people of Japan. The last gasp of that really was in the 80s, when people were worried about the Japanese, buying up our companies and our land, kind of like what they're worried about with China now. But after Japan went through the lost decade, and they went through their big financial collapse in, I think, 1991, all that faded away, and people see the Japanese as fairly docile. And still you have Americans that look back fondly on the wanton annihilation of human life. Hundreds of thousands of people. And yes, I understand that lots of people died in the bombing that occurred before they dropped the atomic bomb, because they were dropping all sorts of bombs for hours and hours and hours. And it was, the whole city was on fire. And then they dropped the nuke. Yes, I understand that. Either way, even if they did one or the other, it would still be awful. They were purposefully bombing civilians. That was the explicit goal, just like in Dresden, and I'm sure other places that we haven't heard of. But if you want to talk about just the efficiency of it, how fast it happened, the fact this was one day when they just wiped out hundreds of thousands of civilians in the blink of an eye. When you put it that way, it is arguably the worst thing that has ever happened. And that is what this congressman, let me get his name, Tim Walberg, I believe no relation to Mark Wahlberg what's his brother from Blue Bloods? I don't think he's one of these Wahlbergs because he's from Michigan. I don't know what part of Michigan exactly. Donnie Wahlberg, I think that's the one I was thinking of, the one that's married to the porn star. Anyway, this Wahlberg, no relation to them, so don't send them hate mail. But this guy Tim Walberg at I think it was a town hall meeting in his home district. That's what he told his own voters. He said he wanted Gaza to end up like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And he says, well, I didn't mean using nukes. It's like, okay, sure, you can turn Gaza into Hiroshima and Nagasaki without using nukes. Still just as bad. The end result might take a little longer. It would be really bad if you were able to, whether it was Israel or the U.S., whoever, just wipe out hundreds of thousands of people, in an hour. And that's why I think, arguably worse in that sense, if you take it in terms of, like, deaths per minute, much worse than anything that the Axis was able to do. And that is how the U.S. claims that we won that war. Our government says that we were able to win that war by becoming better at killing than the other guys were. You look at what the Nazis did. They had gas chambers, much less efficient. Think of how long it took them to kill all those people. The logistics involved in running a death camp. It's much, much quicker just to drop one bomb out of the sky and wipe an entire city off the map. And that's what we're back to. Those are the people that we're told are the good guys in this war. I have to say, I'm glad to see, even though this is so irrelevant, in the grand scheme of things, the fact that there could be someone like a Candace Owens, who over this issue would be forced out of an overtly Zionist organization like the Daily Wire, and not back down and not try to equivocate and not go, oh my gosh, of course I love Israel. The fact that there is an audience for that kind of a person shows that people in America are slowly, just like myself over time, opinions are changing. And the Hiroshima and Nagasaki school of foreign policy is waning. Finally, I would have thought it would have waned and gone extinct a long time ago. But alas, that's not the case. I think that social media, the power of it, and I guess thank Mr. Musk for this, for allowing it to happen on Twitter, for spreading these images. I think it's softened a lot of hearts. Because that was what really changed things for me. Not that, because in America the default position is always to be pro-Israel, because everyone's pro-Israel. You don't even consider the other side. Especially not after 9/11. I grew up, growing up in the era after 9/11 and the terror wars and all that. The idea that, the Muslim majority guys who were against Israel, could ever potentially, and it's always dumb to think of things in terms of good guys and bad guys, because there's bad guys on all sides and there's good guys on all sides. It's just a matter of being able to accept that and see the good in people. When I think about people in my age who grew up in Gaza, knowing that they never got an opportunity to even, vote for Hamas, and we're always told by the Zionist side, oh, well, Hamas is, they're the Palestinians voted for them, and so they're guilty. Whatever Hamas does, the voters are guilty of. And it's like, well, people who voted for Hamas now, make up, like, I think I've done the math. It was like 1/4 of the population of Gaza, or something like that. That who's alive today of the current living population. Only about 1/4 of them would have actually voted for Hamas. When you look at how many people voted for Hamas, in that one election that Israel allowed them. And so I think about someone my age living in Gaza, thinking, you've had no control over any of this, and yet I'm told that someone like me, who happened to be born in Gaza, just by pure luck, okay? That's something you don't decide. That is the birth lottery, where you're born, to whom you're born. To be told that that person is, automatically guilty of some crime, and to be executed, and that's justifiable. It's completely unfounded. It's unfathomable. And then as you go, obviously with younger and younger people, even more so. Their arguments don't apply to babies. They don't apply to toddlers. They don't apply to elementary school children. They don't apply to middle schoolers. They don't apply to high schoolers. Unless those people, actually, took place. If they're one of the few people who actually took place in their little terror attack, and I say little, I am absolutely minimizing the terror attack on October 7th compared to everything that has come since. That is a footnote in history as far as I'm concerned. It's the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. You don't look at the hundreds of thousands of deaths in the First World War, the destruction of whole nations, and say, yeah, well, you're drawing a moral equivalency between that and the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand? It's like, no, I'm saying that all of those people who came and died after that, that's much worse than the death of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, okay? That shouldn't be controversial. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.